Turn with me to Exodus chapter 3, and I'll read one verse out of Exodus chapter 6. While you're looking for that, let me put a plug in for our upcoming Bible study. We have one more week this week in our study of the armor of God. We finish that this Thursday night, unless something happens. And then the following week, we will begin our Bible study in the book of Revelation. So I would encourage you to come and be a part of that study. Not because of anything that I may do or say, but I think it's an excellent opportunity for us to learn. Regardless of how many times I have gone through it and even taught it, I am continually learning myself as a result of going through the strife. I think that will be the case for you as well. So if you know someone, I've already been told that we may have some others from other churches coming, which is wonderful. So if you know someone that you think may be interested, certainly invite them. All right, Exodus chapter 3. I want to read verses 7 through 10, and then 19 and 20 through 21, and then we'll skip to chapter 6. Exodus 3, starting with verse 7. Then the Lord told him, talking to Moses, I have seen the deep sorrows of my people in Egypt, and have heard their pleas for freedom from their harsh taskmasters. I have come to deliver them from the Egyptians and to take them out of Egypt into a good land, a large land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and the Jebusites live. Yes, the wail of the people of Israel has risen to me in heaven, and I have seen the heavy task the Egyptians have oppressed with them. Now I'm going to send you to Pharaoh to demand that he let you lead my people out of Egypt. And then if you skip down to verse 19. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go except under heavy pressure. So I will give him all the pressure he needs. I will destroy Egypt with my miracles, and then at last he will let you go. And I will see to it that the Egyptians load you down with gifts when you leave, so that you will by no means go out empty-handed. And then chapter 6, verse 1. Now you will see what I shall do to Pharaoh, the Lord told Moses, for he must be forced to let my people go. He will not let them go, but will drive them out of his land. Father, we ask your blessings on your word this morning. Pastor, just anoint us to speak it, to deliver it the way people can receive it and understand it, and may the ears of the hearers be anointed so that they can receive it. We ask these things in your name. Amen. Just a real quick introduction. We know that from the time of Joseph, he was almost killed, ended up being sold into slavery. He was carried to Egypt and grew in favor with the Pharaoh there, was put in a place of high position. There was a famine in the land of Goshen in Israel, and his family had to have food, so they sent some of the sons there to get food. Joseph took pity on them, brought the whole family to Egypt. They grew and they multiplied. And over the years, of course, Pharaoh died, a new Pharaoh came on the scene, and this was not a kind Pharaoh. He didn't know anything about Joseph, didn't like Joseph as a result. And because the children of Israel were multiplying so much, they were afraid, he was afraid that they would overtake him and his country. So he wanted the male children of the Israelites slain. The midwives refused to do that. They were being led by God. So then his next step was to have all the male children that were born to be thrown into the river to die. Moses was born, kept for about 3 months until they couldn't hide him anymore, put him in a basket, put him down the river. Pharaoh's daughter finds him. He grows up in the palace of the Pharaoh. Moses kills an Egyptian because of the cruelty that he was placing upon the Israelites. He goes into the wilderness, he flees, and he's gone for 40 years. like most of us, came up with a list of excuses as to why he couldn't obey God in the mission that he had been called to do. He labeled himself a poor speaker and being someone that was unworthy to carry that message back to God's people. But let me remind you, God didn't say, Moses, I want you to rescue my people. He didn't say, I want you to convince Pharaoh to let my people go. Instead, he said, now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he says, he will let them go. Because of my mighty hand, he will drive them out of his country. You see, we read the story of Exodus, and we've seen the movies and all, and we think it's a story about Moses. But it's not a story about Moses. The story of the Exodus is about a God who loves his people so much that he reaches down into their bondage and into their captivity, and he frees them all by himself. See, God didn't need Moses to let his people go. He could have done it all by himself. He could have brought Pharaoh down to his knees with just one word. But Moses was offered the privilege. He was offered the privilege of working in unison alongside with God in what is considered probably the second greatest miracle of salvation in all of history. Of course, Jesus Christ being the first. So why was he given this privilege? Because when God called, Moses obeyed. That's why he had that privilege. When God called him, Moses obeyed. In spite of his doubts, in spite of his flaws, in spite of his weaknesses, in spite of his self-labeled, tongue-tied, and unworthiness, Moses said, in effect, yes, Lord, I will go. I will do it. And it was only then that God used his education and the training that Moses had received as a young man to glorify himself. God glorified himself. Don't misinterpret what I said there. Moses was being glorified. No. God uses Moses to glorify himself. Let me share something that we all know, but we don't want to admit sometimes. We don't like the word. But we're all a mess. We all are a mess. I say that because we all have doubts, we all have fears, we all have flaws, we all have weaknesses, but none of that means that God can't use us. None of that. See, it's not the label that we place on ourselves, it's about the identity of the God that we serve. You see, the story is not about me. The story is not about you. The story is about him. A God who can use any and all of us, regardless of what's going on in our life. You see, God is not waiting until you're good enough to be used. If he does, he's never going to use you. He's not waiting until you're more mature in your faith. He's not waiting until you're more knowledgeable of his word, or even less flawed or less of a mess to use you. He's waiting until each one of us say, yes, Lord, I will go. Yes, Lord, I will. And if we're willing to obey, in spite of our doubts, in spite of our weakness, there's no limit to what he can do with us, in our life, and with what he has done for us, the talents that he's given us to use. But we don't want to let go. We don't want to fully say, yes, here I am, God. We hold on to those labels that we've placed on ourselves and say, I can't. Or what if I do it and I mess up and somebody criticizes me, and none of us like criticism. I get it. But let me tell you, if you do anything in this world, you're going to be criticized for it. If you haven't figured that out by now, you will. It doesn't matter what you do, you're going to be criticized for it. It's never going to be good enough. You should have done this. Well, you should have started early. You should have consulted me. You should have used this reference. You should have used this material. It's always a shoulda, coulda. So you're always going to be criticized. So since we're always going to be criticized, we might as well jump in with both feet and say, yes, God, here I am. Use me because I'll accept criticism. In chapter 7, verse 1, we didn't read that, but God tells Moses, he says, I will make you as God to Pharaoh. Now, understand, he didn't say, I will make you a God. He said, I will make you as God. In other words, Moses was going to go and be the direct representation of God. He's going to be God's representative before Pharaoh. So not only was Moses a messenger, but also a direct representation of God, a picture of God's holiness, a picture of God's power to a man who thought that he was God. God says, you're going to be my representative, and you go talk to this man who thinks that he's God. He chose him to do that. You see, the Pharaohs, and we need to understand here, just a little quick lesson for you. Pharaoh is not the man's name. Pharaoh was the title, like a king. So the Pharaohs were not just earthly kings in the minds of the ancient Egyptians. They thought that they were actual descendants of God, so therefore they were worshipped as deity. Man. So Moses came back to the palace, most likely to the very palace that he was raised in, but he was no longer royal prince. He didn't have on fine linen cloth around his loins. He didn't have soft sandals. Instead, he had probably a woolen, rough tunic. He had cheap sandals, rough sandals. They were dirty, they were worn. He didn't have any gold around his neck. And he had a staff like a desert nomad. Goes back to where he was raised as royalty. That's a beautiful picture of Jesus, our Messiah. Because you see, he gave up all it's unfathomable, the riches of heaven. He gave up all of that to come to earth the first time, not as the conquering hero, not as the conquering king, but as a good shepherd. He too had cheap, rough sandals and tough, rough woolen clothing about him. But he was the perfect image of God. He was the perfect image of the sinless Father. And just like Jesus, Moses was given the privilege of being a picture of God to Pharaoh. I thought about it this morning in Sunday school when Wendy said that she didn't feel worthy to teach that lesson. And my comments to her was, you're not, none of us are on our own, but it's through the righteousness of God that we become worthy. You see, we have been given the privilege. It's an awesome task, but it's a wonderful privilege to be used by God. We are the representative of God. God has said, I want each one of you who have accepted me in your heart and your life, who has given your life to me and asked me to forgive your sins, I want you to be my representative. I want you to represent me who are lost and dying. And whether we like it or not, whether we accept it or not, that's an awesome privilege. It's an awesome privilege. Moses was